Hey y'all, Coach in the Fight here. Got Drake with me.
Hey, how you doing?
And this class is going to be the new moon report for the month of October in the year 2021. And in today's video, what I'm going to do really quickly, as quickly as I can, I'm going to show you which month we're in. You know, there's a lot of controversy over the calendar this year because of some discrepancies between the Jewish calendar and the sacred calendar. You know anything about that, Drake?
Yes.
What do you know about it?
The sacred calendar is the moon calendar, and then the Jewish calendar, isn't that sun-based, or am I off?
Yeah, the sacred calendar is moon-based, and the Jewish calendar is actually, in fact, sun-based. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, there's some with like, hey, but when you think about it, what Constantine did, and that's kind of what I wanted to touch on here, looking at a website from worldlastchance.com, which, you know, gives detail of, you know, how Constantine and a gentleman named Hillel II actually changed the calendar. But what they changed it to is more of a sun-based calendar, because you have to remember, I don't know if you know who Constantine was, mm-hmm. but he was the Roman Empire at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing about him, he was worshiping the sun. Mm-hmm. So he basically helped change the calendar to where it is a sun worship calendar, right? And so I know I'm kind of mixing things up a little bit there, but you know what you said is true. Is the sacred calendar actually goes based on the moon and uses it to tell time, whereas the Gregorian calendar is kind of a man-made creation to keep track with all of his holidays like Christmas and Easter and all of that. But anyway, what I want to do first of all is to show when the new moon will actually start for the year 2021, or the 7th month in the year 2021. You know who Constantine was?
You said the Roman emperor, wasn't he? I heard he was a guy. He was a white guy that wasn't even from the area. Ended up being the ruler of Rome, and he was like Catholic.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the first Catholic or something like that. But yeah, he wasn't a Hebrew at all. He wasn't in the faith at all. He had never even been baptized, but he ended up being head of what we call the Christian church today. Even still today, a lot of his rules are still in effect. Like we mentioned earlier, the whole calendar is changed based on, you know, what he wanted, and that was keep track of Easter. But anyway, we're looking here in the month of October for the year 2021 on timeanddate.com, and we're scrolling down and we're looking for the new moon. Now, the way this works is you have the 0% moon, which will be on 6:05 a.m. on the 6th. 6:05 on the 6th will be the 0% moon. That's when you can't see the moon at all in the sky. Then on the 7th, there will be a 2.5% moon. So the way they did it back in the old days is people like yourself, firstborn males, they call them Levites. They went out into the open field where they could see such things. They would look and verify that they had seen this 2.5% moon. You remember what the moon looks like when it's really thin? Looks like a really thin fingernail. Mm-hmm. Well, 2.5 is actually pretty big for a new moon, so it's going to be a lot brighter than normal this year. Yeah. But when they see that, they'll blow their horns, letting everybody know that we are now in a new month. Now, the significance about this year is we're entering the 7th month. And on that particular day, that new moon on the 7th month is a big day. It's called the Memorial of Blowing of Trumpets. You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where they basically let everybody know that this time has been spotted, because after that, it's called the Day of Atonement. And I know you remember that because as a child, we would fast on that day. Mm-hmm. Remember, we would not eat at all, and then right after that day was over, we'd all run down to the restaurant and, you know, pig out. You remember that? So that's a very important day. So on the Memorial of Blowing of Trumpets, you're kind of giving everybody heads up saying we got 10 days coming. All right, so it's a big deal. And then you have the Feast of Tabernacles even after that, which is probably the most significant feast day of the year. right? So, you know, really people are really gearing up for that. And so that's why this video is important, because what we're doing is kind of making a prediction on when this new moon will be, right? A lot of people watch this channel and they actually are getting in the idea of viewing the new moon for themselves, because what we're going to learn here is that even the Jewish calendar is a modification of the sacred calendar. So whereas in most years they match up, in the year 2021 there's a mismatch. They're actually celebrating their feast days a month too early. They've already done Tabernacles and are finished with it. But we'll see here with a few scriptures that I'm going to show you that we are actually still waiting on the new moon to indicate the beginning of the 7th month. All right. So, but looking here at timeanddate.com, we see that we'll have a 2% moon on the 7th, which will make the day of the 8th the first day of the month, first full day, because that's the daylight hours when people will have new moon celebrations and such. But the trumpets will blow on the 7th. I think I'll title this video something like 7:07 on the 7th will be the beginning of the 7th month or something like that. But anyway, let's go on. Let me go over and show you a few important scriptures that you need to know about when it comes to the calendar. Now we're going to come to a book called the Book of Jubilees. May not have heard of that one, huh, Drake?
I think I've heard it in fleeting.
Yeah, but you ain't read much of it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. It's this is part of the hidden books. Now you heard of the apocryphal books.
Yes.
Those are kind of like, they act like they're like a supplemental like books, because they're in some Bibles. The apocrypha is in some Bibles, but the hidden books are ones that they're not going to be in your Bible. They are hidden, but the reason why they hid them is because of the information with the calendar. You know, we talked about Hillel II and Constantine. We didn't go into how they actually created what we know today as the Bible, right? You know, it has 66 books in it. You know why it has 66 books in it instead of 67 or 65? Why? It's because this Constantine and the Catholic Church had a council meeting and decided which books will be included in the Bible, right? So they sat there and they tried to take out the book of Revelation, but you know, they weren't able to, and we now have 66 books, whereas there were more books. The way the story goes is that they asked the disciples to bring all of their books into the council meeting and put them on the table, like this table. And they start putting the books on the table and putting the books on the table and putting the books on the table. But when the books fell off the table, the ones that couldn't stay on the table because too many, they're not included in the Bible. They just kept the ones that was on the table. So anyway, so this book right here is one of the hidden books. And down here in chapter 6, in about verse 23, it starts talking about these seasonal days, these days of remembrance. It starts talking about the 364-day calendar. You ever heard that the calendar has 364 days in it?
Yep.
You ever wonder how that works?
364, wasn't it the it was 364 days, but because of the rotation that we add that quarter on and just call it 365.
Yeah, something. Well, what it is that the earth has what they call a progression, meaning that it's actually not 365 and a quarter days. There's like an extra 11 minutes in there, right? Yep. And the thing about those 11 minutes, they count. So if you go out so many tens of thousands of years from now, you'll add, and the seasons will actually be reversed, where we'll be celebrating, we'll be skiing in July, and we'll be swimming in December, because things will be just backwards. Well, our Father in his infinite wisdom, knowing this, set up his calendar to where it resets itself every year. So we don't have to worry about that 1.25 days or that leap year or anything like that, because every single year, because there's not a 365th day on the calendar, when you get to 364, you start over, it resets itself, so it can never progress. So no matter how far in the future you go or how far in the past you go, it's still on the exact same day, right? There's no progression. There's no slippage, and all of that's talked about in these verses here. Let me find one to read. I'll read this in verse 32. It says, command thou the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. For everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. So whereas we know from empirical evidence that there are in fact 365 and a quarter days, right? If you sit here and count them every year, you're going to come up with that number. But the thing about it, to make sure you don't lose the track of the feast because of that progression now, to make sure you don't lose track of the seasons and the years, the calendar resets itself every year. It's like, whereas the other calendars are freewheeling, right? And so eventually they're going to be at way too far out of check. Our calendar is kind of just resets itself like a jerking thing every year. And it's only because it's missing about 12 hours when you really think about it. Those 12, So, but you understand how it's saying that you have to keep up with this 364 day calendar, or it says there are penalties associated with it. You're losing feast days and disturbing years and that kind of thing, but it goes on. In verse 33 it says, but if they do not, because you got to remember it's talking to the children of Israel, right? That's what it said in 32. But in verse 33 it says, but if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and their years will be dislodged from this order, and they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. So it's saying that if you don't keep up with this, if you don't keep up with the 364 days, your year is going to get messed up. And that's why there is a Gregorian calendar, is because the years have become messed up. When Constantine was in power, the equinox fell on about March the 20th, March the 21st, but by the time we got to King Gregory, it was off by 11 days. And the equinox was falling like 11 days too early, 11 days too soon. You can look it up in your history book. But the thing is, he changed it and brought the calendar back so that it lined up to where it was supposed to be. So they would have Easter right. So that's why his name is on it, because he changed, he basically just reset it. The same way ours get set every year, he reset his back in about 1500s. In the 1500s, he said it. Think about it, it caused riots, and they, burned a bunch of stuff down in Europe, and then because, it was a big deal to change the calendar. So I believe that's why they're afraid to change it now, even though you see an error, a disconnect between the Jewish calendar and the sacred calendar. But anyway, what we're seeing here on this page is biblical proof that this, or proof that the Bible is accurate, because we see this is actually played out just the way it says. But it goes on to say, and all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the paths of the years, and will forget the new moons and the seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to the order of the years. So think about that. How many people do you know that keep up with the new moon? Not many. All right. What about the Sabbath days? A lot of people that keep up with Sabbath days, but
the new moon.
Don't they keep them up with the Sabbath days on Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, they go by the 7-day sun
calendar, which, like we came from earlier, when we talked about earlier, the sun calendar came from Constantine. So they are in fact following the Sabbaths according to the sun instead of following them according to the moon. That's why they have their Sabbath days on Sunday. That's the first day of the week, but it's also Sunday, this day to worship the sun, just like moon is the day to worship the moon. So they're switching. So yeah. But the point is that even if you wanted to do right and you understood the error in doing the Sabbath day on Sunday, what day would you choose? How many days would you choose? Saturday. So even then, we're still wrong, because Saturday is Saturn's day, the day we worship Saturn. Yeah. So you're basically going from, some would say, bad to worse. But my thing is that you have two sides arguing, one arguing for Sunday, one arguing for Saturday, and according to what we see in the scripture, they're both wrong. Neither one of them's right. But, you know, that's another subject. But here in verse 35, it says, "For I know that from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not for my own devising, for the books lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of the days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles after their error and after their ignorance." So now I know there's a lot, and I know I messed it up in reading it, but do you know what the feast of the covenant is?
Yes.
What is the feast of the covenant?
Isn't it the feast after Atonement, or is that
Tabernacles, you mean?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, no, it's not. The feast of, and it tells you in this chapter that the feast of the covenant is actually Pentecost. Now, you might not remember Pentecost from a child because we didn't really understand Pentecost, and we didn't keep Pentecost. We didn't do much at all. We knew it was there, but we didn't know what to do with it, so we did nothing on Pentecost. But that is actually the feast of the covenant. But that actually proves the Bible's real when you can look at our own testimony, understanding that we didn't recognize this calendar as it's talking about here, and we too, even though we knew much about the Bible, had no idea what the feast of the covenant was. Yeah. Right? And it talks about these other things. It says not only will we forget the feast of the covenant, so we've forgotten it as a whole, and it says, and we will walk according to the feast of the Gentiles. Now, what's the feast of the Gentiles?
Like Easter.
Yep.
And
Christmas and
what is it? Good Sunday, Good Friday, or whatever.
Well, that's part of the whole Easter program. Let me show you the feast of the Gentiles.
Christmas and stuff like
that. Yep, Halloween and Christmas. All right, so here are the feast of the Gentiles. Now, you may not recognize their names because these are the gods that's associated with them, right? So you're looking at these. Do you recognize any of these holidays?
I know Yule is Christmas.
Don't call the names out. That's actually illegal. That's against, I should have showed you this. Yeah. But you're right. That one is Christmas. The next one is this one that begins with I is Valentine's Day. Then you have Easter.
Yep.
And then you have, I'm not sure, I think that's kind of May Day. I don't know what these are, all May Day. But these are the feast of the Gentiles. What we've done is just giving Christian names. You know, so we call it Halloween instead of by the name of this God over here that begins with this S. Yeah. That's the name of the God that they're actually worshiping on Halloween. Right? We did a video on this a few years ago about Halloween and the different elements of Halloween. Just like Christmas, everything about Halloween is not evil. It may seem like it is, but there's only certain things that are required for the worship of this particular God. Just like on Christmas.
Yeah,
like
their, I forgot, not a ceremony.
Ritual. Yeah. So like for Christmas, the Christmas tree is necessary for the worship of that particular God. We usually associate it with this log that they burn, but that's just part of it, part of the rituals that they go through, like you said. But those are part of but you know, the lights and the gifts, one could argue that those are not part of the worship of this particular God. Like on Easter, did you know that wearing new clothes on Easter is part of the worship of that God? Yeah, it's their religion, or whatever you want to call it. To honor that God, you wear new clothes on his day. So that's why they go shopping and wear new clothes. They don't wear new clothes on any other day, right? Yeah.
That's the day you actually post.
Yeah, and that's why people frown upon you when you don't have new clothes on. Yeah, they look down on you because you're not, just like not having a Christmas tree, you're not worshiping that God appropriately. You know, and so you can get in the details of this thing, you know, like we were talking about yesterday, the jack-o'-lantern. The thing about the jack-o'-lantern is when it came to your house on Halloween and said trick or treat, the treat was supposed to be that you gave one of your children to them. You gave them a sacrifice. When they said trick or treat, they're asking you for you to give them a sacrifice, whether it's your baby, your funky old uncle, somebody has to come out of your house because it's your turn to give somebody up for this blood sacrifice. If you did, they would give you a jack-o'-lantern to put on your doorstep. And this jack-o'-lantern signified to the next group coming that you have already given. And so they see your jack-o'-lantern and pass you by. But if you didn't have your jack-o'-lantern, now you're going to get the trick part. The trick is where they're going to mess with you. You know, whatever they're going to do.
Burn your house down.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. But that's a little rough. But yeah, that's exactly what they're about to terrorize you.
Yeah.
Because but my point is that these are the feast of the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. So we're looking back over at this scripture that tells us that if we don't keep up with this calendar, this is going to happen. Right there where it says, lest they forget the feast of the covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles and after their errors and after their ignorance. So even as our own testimony, because we didn't understand this calendar, we were too walking according to the feast. We were walking according to the feast of the Gentiles. This is why we were walking according to the feast of the Gentiles and not understanding the feast of the covenant and the rest of the feast days, is simply because we lost track of the calendar. But like I remind you, we had help from Constantine and his Hillel too, because they actually modified the calendar. Constantine was the emperor. He had the sword and he was killing a lot of disciples. Hillel too was the president of the Sanhedrin. He was like the head Jew, right? He was the man calling the shots. He decided when, you know, he was the guy and responsible for telling us when the feast days in the calendar was. So what he ended up doing was modifying and changing the calendar so that today it doesn't follow the 364-day calendar, but it's actually a calculation. And it used to show me when I would put in Jewish calendar equation, it would actually show me. But, you know, and I could probably pull it up on another video. But if you read at least one of these articles, you'll find out that the Jewish calendar is based on mathematics. Whereas according to what we read in Genesis, go over there, put your eyes on it. Yeah. Now we just whip out our calculator and figure out when the new moons are or when the feast days are. And in the year 2021, they're off. They was off in the year 2013 too. So it's like at least every 7 years we're getting this thing wrong. And I believe that personally has something to do with our walk, because, you know, even those who are trying their hardest, it's like they're going to get tripped up every 7 years because the Jewish calendar going to throw them off. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up there. You got anything else, Drake?
No, that's fine.
You think you learned anything? Well, we're going to call this part 1. We're going to actually come back in and do another part to this calendar, because, you know, this one is really important, you know, as far as getting these particular feast days right. Because, you know, like you said, you kind of want to be consistent. You don't want to get off track every year. So, but anyway, if you got anything out of this video, everybody else, go ahead and hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button, but leave us a comment either way. And shalom.
Shalom.